Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. This is episode 18. If this is the first time you're viewing, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. So, my name is 4AS, and this is my co host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well for IS. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well. And okay, we might be running this back with Star Wars, but I think we need to do it because of the recent series Andor. And this is also a response to some Reddit comments that we actually got on our last episode that we did on Star Wars. And I think they were kind of true comments because a lot of people were saying, well, hey, yeah, you can make the argument that the prequel trilogy, the originals and the sequel trilogies are like leftist thinking or leftist rebellion ideas, but at the end of the day, all they do is establish the status quo, and they don't really do anything until another fascist regime appears again, which is a fair comment. So, but what's interesting about Andor is that I feel like it's a proper deep dive into the idea of how to make a rebel and actually kind of going into that kind of rebel ideas and um yeah, the prison scenes. That's definitely what I want to analyze today because I feel like those episodes very much focused on leftist thinking and possibly even a bit of Marxism. So that's kind of what I wanted to explore today. So like
Okay.
what did you think of those episodes?
Yes. Well, look, it was interesting for me because I haven't watched the whole series. I've stepped in for episodes 9 and 10, which is obviously where the action happens in terms of rebellion, and where it comes in for me for some good old fashioned revolutionary analysis. And I've found it very, very interesting because it gives you, I guess, it's a good case study for what it is to rebel, why those sentiments will come forward in the first place, and then the things that have to kind of solidify and culminate
Mm,
before one can convince others of the cause. And one can also um, demonstrate, I think, to themselves that what they're doing is right. It's not just a hope and a prayer. It's not just
mm,
this like strange ideal. It's actually real.
mm,
And there is no moment like the present. And I think all of the scenes that work around this kind of slave-esque prison world that they're all trapped on and they're all trying to break free from,
mm,
it just encapsulates that sentiment just so well. And yeah,
mm,
it's just a good case study in what it means to be a rebel and to want to break free. And so, whether that's to break free to revolutionize or just to break free of an unjust system,
mm.
it doesn't really matter. It's really just about the sentiments, and I think that's really really important as revolutionaries, as we try to kind of educate and inspire revolution in our peers and like across the planet. We have to make sure that we understand that all of the different dynamics, I think, that go into what people go through in terms of like an emotional roller coaster that
Mm.
brings them to the brink where they must make a decision about, from this point onwards, everything that do, we do for the cause.
Yeah.
And that's what I really loved about these two episodes.
Okay, well, I think this might be a good time that if you happen to have not watched the series or not watched those specific episodes, we'll probably go into a recap, which, of course, spoiler alert. But yeah, just to kind of give people a bit of context. So, at least the start of this episode, you have Cassian Andor, which if you've watched Rogue One, and you also like, the whole point of Rogue One is that little reference that in the original Star Wars Episode 4, the line that the lady says, where it's like, "Oh, a lot of Botham spies died to give us these plans from the Death Star." Basically, that Rogue One story is around that, and one of the main characters in that movie is Cassian Andor, which this season is based on. It's a bit of a prequel season where they're obviously the Galactic Empire are in charge, but the rebellion is starting to get legs. And in this episode, this is the one where Cassian basically did his job of sacking Aldani of the base's money. He's done the job for the rebels, and he's just hightailed out there and gone to the nearest like pleasure planet, it seems, and then he gets arrested there innocuously, which I think is kind of the point, is that he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when a bunch of hooligans are around, that the security guards and the Empire stormtroopers say that they're just causing trouble, so they just throw them into prison, and he gets charged with 6 years imprisonment, just like that. And of course, a bunch of resentment builds up in him and injustice, and he winds up in this prison that basically at any point of time the guards can electrify the prisoners, and they don't have any special boots that the guards have. And he's taken to basically his fellow workers in this prison camp, where each day they're working on machines, and well, it looks very obvious that it's war machines for the Galactic Empire, and they're almost competing against each other, because in one room there's a team leader, and there's all these tables where everyone's working on a machine each, and the reward of the one that's the best, that basically creates the machine in the fastest amount of time, they get food that actually has taste, and then the worst ones get zapped. Because we're told when Cassian first goes in, he gets zapped, and he's told, "Hey, this is actually the lowest setting. You don't want to get it to level 3, which is fatal." And yeah, the deterrent or the stick is, if you're the slowest team, you get electrified. And throughout the base, there's kind of a panopticon feel that you serve out your sentence, but when you go into sleep after your 12-hour shift, the floors are electrified. Like, you can walk out of your cell if you really want to, but it's set to that set to that level 3 threshold, so it basically means death. And we find out during the episode 9 that there are actually some prisoners who can't take the heat, and they rail themselves, as the prisoners call it, where they basically commit suicide by stepping outside their cell and killing themselves. But during the final parts of that I would say halfway through that episode, the resentment builds up in Cassian, and he talks to I think his name is Cloyne, the team leader, and he's like, "Hey, look at what's happening to us. They're not even listening. Has anyone thought about breaking out?" But the thing is, Cloyne only had 300 days of his initial 6-year sentence. So he was like, no, I'm not going to listen to this rebellion talk. I'm just going to do my own thing.
Hmm.
And at the very end of that episode, one of the Cassian's fellow prisoners, he's basically struggling. He has a stroke, and this guy Cloyne and Cassian take him to a medic on site to get him treated. And the medic is very nervous and said, "Oh, this poor bugger, it's probably good that he's going because he got the easy way out." And um Coin and Cassian push him. They're like, "What do you mean by that?" And it was at this stage as well, something drastic happened where there was a power surge outage, and you were let known that on the lower grounds on level 2, something bad happened, and sirens were going, and there was a lot of confusion in the prison. And what the medic eventually isn't pressured to tell them is that somebody from level 4, they had finished their prison sentence, and they were accidentally, instead of being transferred to another facility entirely, there was a transfer error, and the person on level 4 was transferred to level 2, and which people could see, hey, that's the same guy from our level, and people were basically asking questions. So the prison guards, in a panic, completely electrified an entire floor of workers, which proves to everyone, including the team leader Cloyne, that there is no escape.
Yeah.
And Cassian, he continually asks the question throughout the episode, how many guards are on a floor at one time? How many guards are on a floor at one time? He's continually asking this question throughout the episode. And right at the end, Cloyne says, 12 guards. So, like, he's finally on board. And this is kind of, and then obviously episode 10 is the great escape, where they have this plan of basically cutting through to the water supply. So when the guards try and electrocute them when they try to escape, it short circuits their electric floor deterrent that they have. And based on numbers, they overwhelm the guards, and they do manage to do the great escape. But what I want to bring up at this point is those two episodes are the culmination of what Eric Olin Wright covers in his book, How to Be an Anti-Capitalist in the 21st Century, is that anyone in leftist thinking, there's basically two concerns that you have to think about when you're trying to convince people against capitalism, and to not only fight on classist notions. So the whole Marxist idea of, well, once people see that there's inequality, or you have workers, the rights of workers versus the rights of capitalists, that's enough to convince people. But not only do you have classist thinking, but then you also focus on moral thinking. So what was interesting about that episode is that Cloyne, the team leader, he was willing to take on this injustice because he only had 300 days left. He knew that people were killing themselves, that people were struggling, but he was willing to endure that because he only had 300 days left. As soon as that was ripped away from his hands, and that there was basically one way out, as they repeat in episode 10, there's only one way out, revolution. He was just going to handle that injustice. So not only do you have to convince people that there's inequality, or there's an injustice within the system, but that it's within your interest to fight against this injustice because it is immoral. And I found that very interesting that it tapped into that Eric Olin Wright idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was talking about before that. I think they play on the sentiments of rebellion and revolution perfectly.
Mm,
Yeah, they really try to encapsulate what it means in terms of the mental hurdles that people have to go through on
mm,
both sides of, I guess, kind of the struggle of the masses or the people that
mm,
are being oppressed. So you have generally two types of groups of people in a struggle for the oppressed side. You would have
mm,
those people that are instigators or are recognizing that there is a problem and are willing to do something about it. They are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, you could say, or even risk everything to achieve something that's better because they recognize the injustice in the system, but they really need to rally more support to the cause. And like they can try and convince people all they want, but most people, like the team leader you were
mm,
talking about, are so invested in the system itself.
mm,
They believe in it in a certain way, even though they can see clearly that it's immoral or it's unjust, it's riddled with problems. It's even the cause of all of their misery. But because they've got so much invested in it and like all of the everything that they've structured their life around is geared
mm,
towards whatever product or whatever they're going to be delivered to them by this system, they just can't tear themselves away from it to think, okay, yes, all right, because this is immoral or this is problematic, then I should fight against it or I should not partake in the system. I should join with
mm,
people that are like-minded or experiencing the same issues and the pressures as me. No, they are willing to just see it through or get
mm,
to the next stage. And so when those people are able to come to that realization, and it doesn't happen often, and like you don't usually see a majority of people in a rebellion circumstance or even a revolutionary circumstance. It's not like you get 100% of people that are believing in the cause and are willing to stake it all. And you only have a small segment of the population that instigates something, convinces enough of an amount of people, just
mm,
enough to overwhelm whoever the authority is and the authority's kind of weapon of choice or in
mm,
like police force or guards in this instance. You just need enough of them to be able to overwhelm the system for a moment to overthrow it.
mm,
And so you have these two groups of people that are like kind of in this little struggle amongst themselves. One knows that it's right and it must be done, and the other doesn't really want to recognize it because they want to live in their little bubble and their little world and know that if they just keep on going, they've been through enough already. If they just push a little bit harder, they might be able to see it through for them and they'll be okay. And that
mm,
is the big struggle that is presented quite well in this episode. It's the protagonists and that team leader that's in charge of that troop of 100 men
mm,
that are doing that are like indebted or not indebted, they're just imprisoned and they're working
mm,
and doing this kind of yes manual labor, almost factory kind of labor like. So yes, it's got that Marxist element in there where you have people that are rendered or reduced to simple cogs in a machine producing something for an oppressive overlord and all that
mm,
stuff. Um, but yeah, that struggle that goes on within the masses, it's real, and it's kind of displayed quite well here because you really only focus on this one group of prisoners within this entire system. So there's many levels, and really the rebellion only starts and the revolution only starts with them.
mm,
It only takes them to figure out the way that they are going to outsmart and overthrow the guards on their level to break all the way to the top of this system and then override it and then encourage everybody else that this is the time now. If you want to get out, and you want to make, if you want to be free, now's your chance. And I think that's a really good analogy overall,
Hmm.
how a rebellion or how a revolution actually plays out, like historically, or yeah, yeah, or in the past. Like these are how these things play out. You have a bunch of people that have these potential ideas or these sentiments anyway, but like it's only a small segment of the society or the group that will make it happen and will help it be realized. And then everybody else just jumps on the bandwagon kind of thing at the right time, and then they all get the ball rolling together.
Yeah, because the key really was there were like there's basically Cassian who's the major instigator of this, and then well he's not named, but there's another person that Cassian is in league with that he gets on board pretty much straight away that it's an unjust system. But it really isn't until he gets the team leader coin involved that people start to think that, yeah, like we should do this. And there are certain elements of the way this is presented that you could possibly argue that it's Marxist because the whole thing about them creating war machines and setting them against each other, all the other tables of, the one that does the best is gets the carrot of food that has taste, and then the ones that do the worst get electrified, like some Pavlovian like conditioning.
Yeah, yeah,
And there are some very interesting side bits that happen as well. Is that I think when Cassian is getting to know the men that are at his table, they say that, well, hey, when one of us drops dead, yeah, the guards kind of don't care. They'll just replace us pretty much straight away. And the reason why they've got us doing all of this manual labor is because we're a lot cheaper than droids. Normally droids would be doing these machines, but we're just a lot cheaper. And what was interesting about this as well is that it didn't just seem like it was the prisoners that were being oppressed. It's that you felt like everyone was on edge, like even guards. Because what Cassian notices when he first arrives on his floor is that um, uh, it wasn't a tight ship in his prison. Like the guards were nervous and they weren't communicating properly, and the guard that was leading Cassian in, he was just incredibly nervous. Like that could have just been a tidbit that in the next episode when they're actually thinking of escaping, that just gave Cassian the idea of, well, they know that there's 100 of us to one of them. We've got enough willpower to overthrow them. But I think you could also take it into the direction that um, even the middle managers in all of this, which I guess you could say were the guards and the team leaders of the guards, um, you know, I guess in a bit of a Himmler defense, they were just following orders. It's not like they could change the system themselves. They were being influenced and exploited by the system as well.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think, and that's interesting from a Marxist perspective because I know a lot of the sentiment around the time of Marx, and for a lot of people that were analyzing capitalism at during that point in history, kind of the late 19th century, and then going into the 20th century, people didn't believe that capitalism was going to be this force that was just going to be around forever. That's more of a late 20th century understanding that comes after World War II and a bit more stabilizing of the
Right.
world under the guise of US imperialism. But like before that, people just expected that capitalism was, it was crisis prone, and like the workers, I guess the masses of people weren't going to put up with a system that was, you know, exploitative and oppressive forever. And there was going to be some type of revolution, be it social revolution or just some type of return to barbarism. And
Mm,
so you had people like capitalist classes, especially, or upper classes,
mm,
that were on edge all the time. And there's like
mm,
this place in Chicago where there's like these rows and rows of like mansions, and they were owned by, the capitalist classes in the city of Chicago around, that peak of the Industrial Revolution, when after Marx was writing and stuff like that. And there's these rows of mansions that lead or are situated right next to an army base. And the
mm.
story goes that all of the capitalists in Chicago at one point were like, well, the revolution is coming at some point, so we might as well be next to the army base when that happens, and we can all just go there for safety. And so, like, if there's
Right.
this kind of, it's very interesting. So, like, there's this sentiment, yes, amongst the guards, you can see how nervous they are. And that's why it's a repeated question throughout the whole of this kind of rebellion, this rebellion in the prison kind of scene that they're doing. And they're constantly coming back to. It's all about how many guards are there, how many guards are there, because you know that they, like an analogy directly for the masses and capitalism and
Mm,
all that stuff, you know the masses just outnumber that ruling class of people and their oppressive tool, whatever their police force, army, whatever force that they use. You know that they're just outnumbered, like, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, a million to 1, whatever you want the ratio to be. It's enormous, and it's completely overwhelming. And like they're just, everything's on a knife edge. And like when people are pushed to an extreme, and that's the
mm,
other message that really comes here, which is quite strong, I think, when it comes to, if you want to be serious about how you have a real rebellion or a revolution. It comes when people are pushed to the extreme. These people
mm,
who are living in fear of death constantly, with all of life's pleasures taken away from them, with the one hope that as long as they serve their sentence, they're out. And as soon as that perception breaks down, and like there is like the slightest hint in the air, the rumor mill is starting to run that they actually will never get out. And then this whole world and this whole kind of fantasy comes crashing down, and people are already on the brink and they're pushed to the extreme, then the system comes crashing down, because people know at that point they actually have nothing to lose. And historically, that's when most revolutions and rebellions and all that sort of stuff happen, when the regular people and the masses have nothing to lose. And that's what makes ruling classes and authorities very nervous,
mm.
when people are pushed to the brink of knowing that they have now nothing to lose. And so they might as well just bet it all.
Yeah, because this is kind of the point that I was making before, is that uh, it, Eric Owenlin Wright in his book is that he seems to say that the successful leftist or anti-capitalist arguments throughout history have straddled the line of um, classist thinking and moral thinking. So yeah, like the 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 fight between workers and capitalists are obviously a typical classist thinking, and but then something like a moral protest. So say pick something that's happening right now, the free Assange protests that are going on in the world. So it's basically the fight between getting those people on board on the classist side of things, where it's like, oh, there's such inequality, and you know, the 1% are ruling everything, and the dejectors to that would be like, oh, okay, well, I know it's an unjust system, but I kind of have enough, and I'm able to get by in this world. I'll just kind of deal with it. Yeah, it sucks that other people are having a worse time than me, and that it sucks that other people are having a better time than me, but I'm able to kind of get by. And then on the moral side of things, um, yeah, it would be like, oh, okay, well, the stuff that's happening to that guy, it kind of sucks, but I don't really see how that affects me. And it's straddling that line between that, which obviously Andor in this series is able to straddle in the prison is, well, the one thing you were hanging on to was, yes, it was an a just system, but you only had so many days until you were released. So until they find out that, well, they're transferred, but they're transferred to another prison, which they'll basically work until they die. That's when they adopt the motto of there's only one way out, one way out. And um, sure, a lot of deaths happen in Andor's like shop floor. Like if I'm not mistaken, like half of them die trying to get a hold, like to overcome those like three or four or maybe even five prison guards that are looking after them. Because, well, really, what do they have? Like a bunch of wrenches compared to blasters that the guards have.
Yeah.
But uh, but as soon as they overcome them, it's basically a trickle turned into a flood. They had guns and it was equal. And you know what? We're talking about 100 men. Divide that by two, there's suddenly 50 of them that have guns. And then obviously they release the next floor, and then the next floor, then the next floor. And yeah, like it it only takes one act, and then suddenly the revolution starts.
Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting kind of question then around the team leader, because if the people that instigate rebellions and revolutions are important, right? That small group of people that are always keen and ready to go. But then
Mm,
it really then pins on someone like this team leader, someone with influence,
mm,
some type of status within the masses, who really has structured their whole life and all of their aspirations around the system and stuff like that. And when that breaks down for them, and then they are convinced that the only way out is to rebel and to break free from the system, everything really pins on that. And like you hear, like, leftists and revolutionaries will talk a lot about opportunists and people
mm,
that lead off the system to try and, I guess, get some gain from the status quo, and will sell out their brothers in arms and people of their own class and their own class interests. They'll sell them out because, it's easier to just kind of, instead of biting the hand that feeds you, just living off the status quo and the establishment and all that sort of stuff. And so
mm,
you can say there could be an argument that this team leader is kind of an opportunist in a way, because he is the team leader of this section of troops. While he is a prisoner himself, he's still the one that maintains their order.
mm,
It's really interesting that he's from the oppressed classes, but like a manager or something like that on the shop floor, he's from the oppressed classes. He's not a capitalist, or he's not one of the guards or the
mm,
evil empire. He's just like them. He wants to be free, but like he's being used and manipulated, or he's offered his services somehow to help control and oppress his brethren.
mm,
So like there's an argument to say that he's an opportunist there, because he's taken up kind of this role that helps to oppress people. But in that, though, he's not opportunistic in the way that he's really only doing this because he believes that he will get out. He's not
mm,
doing it. He's not stepping over people, and like crushing people or turning them in, um, just to get ahead. He's doing it because he just thinks that this is his path to liberation. But I think those people are key. These people that are kind of a
mm,
blurred line between the oppressed masses, and they could be potentially considered to be opportunists as well,
Mm.
because they're usually people that hold a bit of status and influence in the current system. And once they realize the truth behind the cause, then they have this immense power to mobilize people and make and win people and in droves to the cause. And there's this really powerful scene in like the I think it's obviously in episode 10 where the rebellion is really kicking in and they've taken
Mm.
hold of the main kind of nervous center of this whole prison. And
Mm.
he gets on like the system on over the
Yeah.
PA system and stuff like that. And the protagonist is like, you do this all the time. You're yelling at us all the time and telling us to,
To
to
get in
follow
line and stuff like that. Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. You've got the floor now. You've got the mic in your hand. Tell everyone on every floor what's happening,
Mm.
and you know, and get them going. And like it takes a while for him to warm up to it, but he really starts to kind of come alive halfway through his monologue, and he's telling them about the truth. And he tells them this is how the system works here, and you'll never have an opportunity again like this. We've taken control of this
Mm.
place. And if you want out, you've got to get out now. They don't know what's happening
Mm.
because we've overwhelmed them, and there's no one coming to save them for the time being. So now's your chance to get out. And so I think it's really important as revolutionaries to not only want to kind of beat the drum and be there constantly telling people of the revolution and how they should come to this side and all that sort of stuff, but
Mm.
like you need to be converting key people, and usually they're the types of people that you wouldn't associate with rebellion and stuff. They're people that are institutionalized. Sometimes they're people that are important players within the system themselves, but they have influence, and you
Mm.
can harness that. And like they're going to need support. Like this team leader, as much as he was angry when he finds out about this kind of lie that he's been sold this whole time, his
Mm.
immediate reaction is not to rebel. His immediate reaction is to just kind of go into this little shell. He's like shell shocked and like
Yeah.
to approach and discuss anything. And then when people are like talking and like there's a bit of banter going on, he just kind of cracks and he goes, "It's true. We're not getting out of here. That's it. So everyone shut up and just go to bed," kind of thing, because he just can't handle it. But when the action starts, then
Mm.
it's the protagonist again that's pushing him in the back, and so it's like, "Come on, we need you to do a little bit more here, a little bit more. Keep
Mm.
it coming, keep it coming," and he's pushing him all the way, even through the most, the pinnacle, the climax, you could say, of this rebellion moment.
Mm.
He's still there pushing him, saying, "I need you to do this because people are going to believe you. If someone as influential as you, someone as ingrained in the system as you, has now turned, you will be the face of this little rebellion here." And so you
Mm.
need to convert key players to things, not just about sitting in your little um, echo chambers and keeping to your own people. You've got to spread
Yeah.
the word and start convincing the right people about the need to revolutionize.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have the little slogan of one way out, or at least not everyone's reciting it until after Coin does his the team leader does his little speech.
Yeah.
And until he does his inspirational speech, it wasn't until that moment that everyone started chanting one way out," and then taking up arms and like shooting any of the resistance that they encountered from the guards. But yeah, I guess there's also the little cliffhanger of whether Cloyne actually made it out alive, because we find out that he can't swim. But I guess they probably did that because Cassian only really escapes with one of the other prisoners, and I think you're just led to believe that everyone split up and just went to the various places that they could that were on that planet, and Cassian and the other prisoner he was with, just got lucky that they managed to find those aliens that were happy for them to hitch a ride with them.
Yeah, there's everything after, and that's a nice kind of picture for what it means to revolutionize. Maybe not to rebel, but to revolutionize for sure. Like up until the point where you separate yourself from the existing system and you overthrow it, everything after that is uncharted territory. Like if you look at the French Revolution, the American Revolution, things like that, there is no understanding of what's coming. Like you can have people hypothesizing and theorizing about what might come next, but no one actually knows. No one knows what's coming afterwards. It's complete uncharted. It's just this empty landscape, and you can choose your own adventure kind of thing, whether you do that together or people go off individually and break up into cells and groups and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's a good analogy for what it's like to revolutionize. There's this big culmination of events and like a climax, and then there's the day after that, where like the old system might be broken down and chopped into 1,000 little pieces, and then people have to pick up those pieces and start rebuilding again. And like, some people might go out on their own, and some people might come together and try to form a new establishment or some type of party and get things moving again. But it's completely unknown. It's absolutely unknown. Some people might be able to piggyback off the existing system, but like that's quite clear when they leave this prison that they are rebelling from it and leaving it. They're leaving it behind. There's no intention to try and make that system theirs, which is a bit different to the kind of the anti-capitalist struggle, which is the usual kind of intention there is that the system has legs in and of itself. It's just manipulated for the interests of private property and like the capitalist classes. And so you can use the system or the framework anyway for the system to have a more social focus, and you can revolutionize the system to be there for all, not just for some.
But I would kind of disagree with you there that they kind of escape from the system and then that's kind of it. Because I thought that was the whole reason why when Cassian parts ways with the other guy that he was with, the other prisoner says to him, it's like, hey, we've got to split up to double our chances, but we have to tell people what happened. We have to spread the word. And like I got a sense of it like an epiphany during a mass that somebody had, and then the congregation went out into the public to spread the word. And I got the sense of the way he was structuring, the way the scene was structured, it was like they had to spread the gospel of rebellion. I got that kind of sense, and I think they knew that this galactic empire system was pervasive, that it was like, sure, they escaped the prison, but they weren't going to escape the prism of the galactic empire's fascism until they overthrew that. They just had experienced an oppressive microcosm of what the galactic empire could do, and they wanted to preach the gospel of rebellion. And I wouldn't be surprised, along with Cassian, if the Rebel Alliance ended up picking up all of those, or at least some of those prisoners that escaped, and they had hardcore rebels from then on until they died.
Yeah, that type of situation. Like, obviously, I think a lot of them would have just sought just general freedom. or liberation, and would have gone back to wanted to go back to their lives before that. But yeah, that sort of event would definitely create some hardened rebels and some people that want to now stick it to the real system and to go
Mm.
on. And I think in that episode, this is completely, I guess, unrelated to the prison scene, but there is another scene in episode 10 where there's two rebels speaking to each other,
Mm.
who's like kind of a double agent, and one who seems to be the mastermind of this infiltration into the Empire's kind of intelligence structure.
Yeah, the ISB.
Yeah, and they have a really interesting conversation about the sacrifices that they both have to make to be a rebel and to be someone who gives their life to the cause. And it's a really, really powerful scene between these two people. And like they're both talking about what it is that they've given to the cause. And they both talk about taking a vow to the rebellion and all that sort of stuff. And
Mm.
like, one has very obvious sacrifices, and like kind of turns to the other and says, well, what do you sacrifice, kind of thing. And I think this is interesting for all of us that are
Mm.
listening to this right now, because I think we're all on the same page with this. And we're all sitting in the same moment in time now and experiencing it. But he said, okay, well, what have you sacrificed? And this mastermind kind of who's working in the shadows is saying, well, as a young person full of rage, I decided to join the rebellion because I wanted to fight the system. And like, you make a choice
Mm.
in youth, sometimes that will live with you forever because you take a vow to do these things. And like, you sell yourself to that cause. And so, one, that's what it means to be a rebel and to be a true revolutionary. You will have to, at one point, it's not a hobby. You do have to kind of give your life to the cause.
Mm.
And he says as well that because of that and because of the part that he has to play, he will never have any real social relationships. He won't love anyone. He won't enjoy any times and share those with other people because he has to kind of live this double life, or he has to live this life as a social recluse because he can't have connections with people. But more than that, and the most striking thing for me, which I think is really true for people like us, is that, okay, you're going to dedicate yourself to something like the cause, this revolution, this thing that's going to happen
Mm.
sometime, hopefully in the not too distant future, but at some point. But you need to put that effort in. You need to put that cognitive machine here. You need to be that person that does this job, however dirty it is or however honorable it is. But you will never see the
Mm.
sunrise. Your
Mm.
whole life will be dedicated to a cause like Marx or like other famous revolutionaries and all that sort of stuff. You will never see the sunrise, but you will dedicate your life to something that you just hope will work out for future generations. You hope that will change humanity forever. You hope that will destroy this some unimaginably unjust and horrific system. And you just hope that your efforts will go
Mm.
towards changing that. And but that's the real definition of being a rebel right there.
Mm.
Rebels and revolutionaries and the like, they are not optimists. They're
Mm.
not doing things because they think it will work out. They don't do it for that reason. They have hope that it will work out at some point, but they will give their life to the cause to make that happen for someone, hopefully in the not too distant future. And they
Mm.
will have, unfortunately, sacrificed much in the way to get there or on the way to get there. So it's a very, very powerful scene, and it wraps up so nicely after you see all of that actual physical and the sexy part of the revolution, I like to call it. Because the stuff that comes after is not sexy and people don't talk about it. But it's a very interesting kind of imagery that he portrays, that we will never see the sunrise. It's
Mm.
quite likely us as revolutionaries will never experience that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be just as enthusiastic about dedicating ourselves to the revolution.
And you know what? That's a pretty good point to end on. Um, yeah, we had a that's a good point to end on. So, as the last segment, as always, guys, we have the synthwave art, which is very graphic. It's basically the prompt for this one was Cassian Andor and the prisoners and the prison escape. And yeah, it's Cassian up the front and all the rebels cheering with um, a decapitated head of the Emperor on the wall. So very much going for the bloody essence um, of rebellion.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best ones we've had thus
Yeah,
far.
the AI nailed it that time.
And with that, everyone, we'll bring this podcast episode to a close. And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And to sign us off, I'll give it to you, Mr. A.
Thank you very much for IS. And for all of you out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.